All right, so now we are on our way, and we have a very nice, well-formatted worksheet. It looks identical, nearly identical to what we see in the casebook itself. So the next phase of our analysis requires us to enter in the implementation costs and maintenance costs for our project. If you'll remember, we actually calculated and put in the costs in a separate worksheet, and we created totals for both implementation and maintenance costs. It's important to note that implementation costs only occur in year zero. So they only occur as part of the build process and part of the acquisition process. So as we're acquiring and building our system, those are considered our implementation costs, and they only occur in year zero. Maintenance costs, on the other hand, we have zero maintenance cost in year zero, and the maintenance costs are what it costs to run and maintain the system over time. So these maintenance costs are going to occur in years 1 through 20. So it's very important when you're setting up your worksheet that you clearly distinguish between our implementation and maintenance cost. So let's go ahead and populate those values. To type in a formula, so again, I don't want to type in or retype in the actual cost directly into the cell listed here. I want to create a formula to refer to the cell that holds or contains the implementation costs. To refer to a cell on a separate worksheet, there's a special notation and a slight trick that you should follow. I can either type, well, first I type the equal sign to let Excel know I'm typing in a formula, and then I provide the name of the worksheet I'm referring to, followed by an exclamation point, followed by the cell itself, the cell I'm referencing. So I can type in equals costs exclamation point, and then provide the actual column and row cell reference. Most people find this a little bit more cumbersome to do, so what I'll suggest doing instead is, after you type the equal sign, you can just go ahead and navigate to the worksheet of interest, and you can select the cell of interest. You'll notice it puts a dashed border around the cell that's selected, and it's also building the formula for us in the formula builder. And this final part is important. After you have navigated and selected the cell, you either have to hit the check mark or press enter in order for the value to come back and get carried across into our cost-benefit analysis worksheet. Alright, so our implementation costs take place in year zero. We now have them entered via a cell reference. Next, we'd like to enter our maintenance costs, which happen to be zero in year zero. Again, maintenance costs don't occur until we actually have a system that's up and running. And then you'll notice in cell C8, I'm asked to provide the present value factor. And if you go ahead and refer back to the casebook itself, you can get the formula for the present value factor. I'm going to go ahead and type that formula in now. Anytime I use a formula or work with a formula, I start off by pressing the equal sign to tell Excel a formula is about to follow. So here I'm going to type the equal sign and then enter my present value cost, my present value factor formula, which is 1 divided by the quantity 1 plus R, where R is my discount rate, and the discount rate is stored in C1, and I'm going to raise that quantity to T, which is the year. So it's 1 plus the quantity 1 plus R raised to the power of T. Again, I don't want to hard code in my value of T. I want to refer to the cell that actually contains the year itself. So I've created the formula, and this looks pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and press enter or return, and see what we get. And not very surprising, our present value factor is 1 in year 0 because we're in the current year. We haven't moved out in time, so the dollar value hasn't been discounted. The final step when we calculate our cost is to come up with the present value of cost for the given year. So in year 0, the present value of costs is going to be governed and given to us by a formula. So again, I'm going to press the equals key, which tells Excel a formula is about to follow. And our costs, or the present value of costs, are just going to be all of our implementation costs, which are stored in cell C6, plus all of our maintenance costs, which are stored in C7 for the given year. And that quantity, the sum of that quantity, is going to be multiplied by our present value factor, which is how much we're going to discount the value based on the present, the time value of money. And so that's just stored in C8. So we now have our formula for present value of costs, and I see I get a negative $3.375 million present value of costs. So you may be thinking at this point, wow, I'm going to have to type in this same formula or these same formulas 19 times over, and you can go ahead and maybe try and use the autofill to populate those formulas across. But let's see what happens when we do try that. You'll see it gives us some very interesting and incorrect numbers. And so before we can use your autofill to populate the cost for the remaining years, we actually need to make a few changes to our formulas. And we need to introduce and actually provide fixed or absolute cell references. And at this point, if you haven't already, you should go back and look at the tutorial on cell referencing and fixed cell referencing, as it is very helpful for understanding this concept. But we're going to go ahead and I'm going to assume that you've already watched that tutorial, and we are just going to go ahead and move forward. So for our implementation cost, when we look at our implementation cost worksheet, we always want the formula itself to refer to the value that's stored in cell D9. So we're going to create what's called a fixed or absolute cell reference by adding a $ in front of the column and the row for our implementation costs. Now when we use autofill, no matter where we drag and autofill this particular formula in our worksheet, it's always going to refer to cell D9 in the cost worksheet, which is the cell that contains the implementation costs, which is exactly what we want. For our maintenance costs in year 0, we can actually just leave it as 0 for now, but our present value factor, you see we're going to need to make a slight adjustment here as well. So you'll notice when I click on the formula in the formula builder, it highlights the cells that are being referenced by the particular formula that we're working with. And you'll see our discount rate, our interest rate, just shows up in one place one time. And so what that means is whenever we fill or autofill this particular present value factor formula, we're always going to want to refer it back to cell C1. So let's go ahead and turn this into a fixed or absolute cell reference. So we're going to create a $C, $1. So no matter where I autofill, this formula will always go back to whatever is stored in C1. And then you'll notice for my year, I want to fix the row that it's referring to, but I want to let the column vary. So when I autofill, I actually want that red cell to kind of shift and slide down to represent and adjust based on the given year. So I'm going to go ahead and do what's called a partial fixed or partial absolute cell reference, and here we're just fixing the row. So I typed in a $3. So no matter where we drag or autofill this cell, it's always going to refer to row 3. The column will adjust, the column will vary, but will always point back to row 3. Our final formula, doing a quick double check, it looks like this should work out okay. So our present value of costs are the costs and the present value of the cost in a given year. So as we autofill on out, this particular total is going to be accurate. So let's go ahead and see if we can autofill our implementation. Well, before we do the rest of the autofill, let's go ahead and actually calculate or put in our costs for year 1. So in year 1, our implementation costs go down to 0. And our maintenance costs, on the other hand, are going to kick in. So we're going to refer to the cost worksheet by typing in a formula, which starts with an equal sign. Navigate to the cost cell and go ahead and select, it's going to be D14, and we're going to go ahead and change that to a fixed cell reference, $CD, $14, which looks pretty good. And then I'm going to go ahead and autofill the remaining 2 to see what we get and what comes across. And this actually looks pretty good. So now we see year 0 has only implementation costs. Year 1 does not have any implementation costs, but it does have maintenance costs. And by using my autofill and clicking that lower right corner, the present value factor calculated and updated correctly. So now what I can do is I can actually highlight a range of cells and use autofill all the way across for this particular range of cells. So I've highlighted D6, D7, D8, and D9. I'm going to go ahead and do a left click on the lower right corner of my selection, and then I'm going to drag as I'm holding my click button down all the way over to year 20, and I didn't quite get year 20, and I'll go ahead and select that now, and you see that it is filled in for me. Everything gets filled in for me, and things for the most part look pretty good, but there's one slight problem or one slight hiccup. You'll see this implementation costs. Excel made a guess that I wanted a sequence of numbers, increasing numbers from 0 to 1, 2, 3, and so on. And I really want this number to just be 0 straight across the board. So I'm going to go ahead and make a quick adjustment. I'll put in a series of 0, 0 to get a couple of years going. I'll do the autofill all the way across, and now everything looks good. So if we do a kind of a quick double check on our formulas, we see our maintenance costs are always referring to the cell D14 on our cost worksheet. We see our present value factor, which is really cool. It's very slick. It's referring to the correct year, and it's also referring to the correct cell that's holding our discount rate, which happens to be C1. And then, finally, our final formula, auto-filled correctly, it's just taking the sum of our implementation and maintenance costs for the given year, multiplying that quantity by our present value factor, and displaying the total. So here we see that our autofill is again just a tremendous time saver. We did have to go through a little bit of work to set up our formulas, but overall it saves a tremendous amount of time. This concludes the tutorial. Thank you.